Hey folks, Eric Dylan Stanish here with yet another, you guessed it, installment. Oh boy, so just leaving work and headed home. Got some chores, errands, whatnots to take care of, and I have to be to work a little bit earlier tomorrow, so tonight's going to be just a mobility and stretching night, believe it or not. I've recently taken up stretching, as ridiculous as that sounds for somebody who's, been a quasi athlete for as long as I have, that I'm finally now at this elder statesman stage in life, just deciding to start actually following a true mobility and stretching routine. But I kind of looked at the overall progress of my training, lifting, etc., and it's really easy when you've been working out for a long time to become totally stagnant. And we all have, in the lifting realm of things, we all tend to have muscle groups that we like to train, that we would only train that particular muscle or that movement or the set of exercises, like whatever. We all have favorites is what I'm trying to say. For me, it ends up being my traps. My traps and neck. I feel like my traps have been the same size ever since I was 120 pounds, and they've always been a fairly strong muscle group for me. So, training them has been enjoyable. So if I default back to that stagnation that I was talking about without some kind of real set program or progression to follow, I will inevitably catch myself doing things like training traps 2 or 3 nights in a week, or 2 or 3 days in a week, which is absolutely ridiculous because, of course, if you want balance in your body, you have to, guess what? Train the whole damn body. So, in that aspect, it's been probably, within the last month or so, I sat down with myself and said, what am I really doing with lifting? As far as, like when I competed in powerlifting, I've touched on this in one other installment, I was never by any means super strong or a great power lifter or anything like that whatsoever, especially for my weight class. But, I gave a little bit of an attempt at competing in it, and I enjoyed the competition. Loved having a group of people that were all basically almost like a team, that we had, of people that were all training towards breaking their own PRs, breaking their own personal records. And I enjoyed it. I just was never, I wouldn't even necessarily say good at it. I was never at the peak of strength that I needed to be for my weight class to actually radar detector again, to do splendid at competing. And when you put that kind of effort, training cycles, programs, whatnot, into preparing for one particular day that you're going to compete, of course you want to break your PRs. Of course you want to win, and whether that winning is against yourself, which it always is, or, against anybody who's in your weight class or in your division, all that kind of stuff, that sort of shit's really immaterial. It's just the fact that I looked at it and said, I'm not trying to be at any kind of peak of strength with the injuries that I've had that are fairly self-limiting for being able to really train for max single strength. I've had somewhere between, and this is over the course from being 20 years old on till now, I've had somewhere between 15 and 20 plus partial thickness muscle tears. And I'm here to tell you, they suck. They absolutely suck. And the analogy that I use for a partial thickness muscle tear is basically if you have a rubber band, you stretch that rubber band, hold it in a fairly stretched position, you take a razor blade, you just cut little chunks out of that rubber band. That's what a partial thickness muscle tear is like compared to where if you just severed that rubber band completely, that's a full thickness muscle tear. Oh boy, I've had those pecs. I've got really deep insertion holes that I can basically plug my fingers into in the pec delt tie-in area. Those were first. Some rotator cuff issues that went along with that. Oh boy, tricep, quads, little pop in the armpit / lat tricep area. Knock on rocks, never had a bicep tear. Hamstring, when I was attempting to play arena football and we were doing our indoor sprints, popped a hamstring. That was a bad one. Somewhere there's, I think maybe a video of it, but we were at second or third sprints running our 40s, and that was terrible. I don't even know what my time was. Probably, 27 seconds. I'm just kidding. I don't know what it was. But it was definitely not sub 4s or anything like that. Don't let me tease you. I wasn't that kind of fucking athlete. But one of my buddies that was also playing arena football at the time was watching, and he said, that I was sprinting and I had hit maybe 38 yards or so, and he said, you legit reached down and grabbed your leg as you were running, and like Sonic the Hedgehog, just rolled in a ball, screaming. And he said he could clearly hear a snap. Now, the fact that wasn't a complete muscle tear just amazed me, but it wasn't. But boy, did it turn black and blue. Same thing with these partial thickness pec tears that I've had. I've had a couple on both sides. And one of the things that anyone who's been injured repeatedly as an athlete, or even just, as a lifter, just injured in general, physically, will reiterate, is it makes you apprehensive. Apprehensive, obviously, let's say if it happened on a max attempt on a deadlift, let's say, and you tore a bicep, you're probably going to have some emotional residual shit going on about healing and going back to that particular lift, that particular exercise. The emotional content of injury is something that I think as athletes and even just as everyday people, we tend to overlook. We just look at the physicality of it. Oh, you've got this injury, here's the recovery process. It should take this long. This is what the steps you need to take. Gradually work back into activity. I mean, all the same standard. Here's the physical therapy you can do, let's say if it's that sort of injury. There's a very pragmatic approach to the strictly physical end of any injury. But there's also the emotional residue from that particular injury, whether it's just that apprehension that I was talking about, or basically, for lack of a better term, the internal wound that you carried from that. And, don't get me wrong, along the same lines that I always talk about of shifting to a more positive mental mindset and by no means having a victim mentality. I don't think it's good for any individual, be it athlete or not, to say, this happened to me. Once again, I was a victim of this. I don't know why I had this injury. Well, I mean, it could have been mechanics. It could have been something genetically. It could have been, God, there's so many different factors. Maybe it was that moment of hesitation. And you see that sometimes in sports when, especially watching in a replay, you can see where somebody hesitated. And what do you know? That seems to be when they would get hurt. Unfortunately. But hesitation makes kind of a gun-shy approach maybe more of your paradigm, and that's difficult, especially when it comes to working out, training, lifting, any of the different modalities of exercise that you want to attribute it to. If you have that gun-shy attitude, even if it's subconsciously because of the injuries that you've had, it's tough to pour yourself into something and really give 110% in that exercise or in that lift, and not feel like that little voice, that little, as they say, devil on the shoulder, angel on one shoulder, devil on another shoulder, saying, oh shit, what if this happens to me again? There's that damn sun behind my bean again. I'll put my big ass head over here, as always, around this time of night. Yeah. So when I was examining, like, what I'm really trying to do with working out, obviously, I'm not going to lie, I've got a component of my personality, my ego, whatever, that's vain, and I want to be aesthetically pleasing, big. For me, that's being bigger, rounder, lumpier, if you want to call it that, more muscular, versus being leaner. And that's been something that I've fought with over the years because I was a skinny little ass kid growing up. So putting on weight via lifting weights and everything else along with that was something that took me a lot of years. So, feeling like I'm shrinking is a deep-seated emotional bit for a lot of people that lift. It is. But, the whole thing, I didn't start lifting because I was too skinny and wanted to get bigger. Lifting was always something for me that was a side effect of a particular sport. Now, the spark for lifting initially came from my grandfather encouraging me to do so, and actually it was when I'm trying to remember, maybe it was between 8th and 9th grade that I had started going to judo classes, and one of the other kids my age that was actually really, really a good judoka, a good judo player even at that young age, because he had been doing it since he was a bebe, was also a pretty decent sized cat of a lifter even for a young budding teenager. And after the first few classes where I felt woefully inadequate, he had encouraged me, hey, lifting's going to help with this. It's always an advantage being stronger, and why not go join a gym, start lifting some weights. So I did. And that led to years and years of the path that I've been on with it. Well, gosh dang it. Okay. There's that sun. I'm not going to be able to block it with my head that far to the left, but I do have a aspect of, different, I guess, goals that you would have with working out. I don't want to be unhealthy. I don't want to be huffing and puffing. I'd like to have, obviously, good cardiac health. Very important, especially as we get older. You start realizing that, going back to that thing, maybe walking around at 300 pounds of muscle, you might think that's cool when you're 20-some years old-ish, and you're just getting into the realm of lifting and working out and whatnot. But then you get a little bit older and you start realizing, maybe that's not the healthiest thing for my body. Especially if you're not a sizable height carrying that kind of body weight around. It's tough on the body, for sure. So looking at all these goals and trying to avoid the I want to do everything all at once mentality that is very difficult, especially when you have been working out for years and years and years. You start realizing that you do need to phase and cycle your training, mesocycles and microcycles and whatnot. You might focus on power, let's say, for X number of, like a training block. Might have a deload week or a week off, and then focus on hypertrophy, and then, you know, repeat that cycle with the next block being speed. I don't know. I'm just throwing different things out there from programs that I've had. But the main thing, like I said, for me was just looking at stuff and going, what the hell am I trying to do with lifting? You know, I'm not going to have false aspirations that I'll just balloon up to 300 pounds of muscle or something. What would be, what the hell? I would shorten my lifespan to begin with by an extreme amount if I ever did everything I'd need to do to get there. Those of you that know what I mean. Just the sheer amount of caloric intake plus body weight plus everything else, you know, that's not healthy, that's not good, it's not the way to go. But you know, by the same token, I don't want to shrivel up by any means. And then looking at things like I said, flexibility, mobility. Have I ever really thrown a serious stretching and mobility program other than when I was, you know, playing different sports? But since I haven't been active in any particular sport for a minute, like when was the last time I really focused on that, or at least had that as a, say, 3 days a week, half an hour? You know, that's not going to make me into a human pretzel anytime soon, but, you know, for nights like tonight that I'm not headed from work directly to the gym, nothing wrong with doing that at home, you know. So, rebuilding myself, lifting-wise, working out-wise, it's just been a process. Like I said, too, of examining things. What do I want to do? What kind of different training blocks am I going to go through, let's say, in a 6-month period or whatever? And, you know, things can happen. Things can throw you off. Like, in my example, my work schedule is a definite part of it because I don't get off work until 7 o'clock. Drive an hour, get to the gym. By the time I change, go to the bathroom, pre-workout, whatever, you know, a ritual, so to speak, and then throw in a full workout. By the time I get home, it's pretty damn late. And then, of course, I'm in the mentality that I'm going to have to eat something and fling myself into bed. And if I've got the remnants of pre-workout zippity-doo-dah away in my system, yeah. First world problems is what those are. Worrying about working out. When there's people out there that, those poor souls that don't know where their next meal is going to come from, or, you know, existing in just austere conditions where life itself could be squelched at any second, let alone being worried about, like I said, such a minimal aspect of life like working out really is. I'm not saying that working out's not important, don't get me wrong, but go to a third world country and yeah, of course there's going to be people that work out, but do you think they're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month or their equivalent there so of money on pre-workouts and gym gear and 8,000 calories a day, bro? No, they're picking up rocks and lifting concrete blocks, throwing them around. I mean, they're doing obviously exercise, but a lot of them to have a much more physical labor oriented lifestyle as far as just sustenance. You know, look at the way humans were during the hunter-gatherer era of our evolution and of our existence on the planet. You would probably be hard-pressed to have found, so to speak, a fat caveman. Well, now granted, their lifespan, as we've found out, could be squelched by some pretty simple things that now we just take for granted. Antibiotics and other developments of science that make us live longer, you know, sanitation, things like that, water filtration. There's a lot of shit that we take for granted, especially in the Western world, in developed countries, that third world countries and their inhabitants, their residents, are clawing for life every single day. You know, and that's a perspective that I think it's easy. We all live inside of our own bubble of existence, of course. You know, our friends, our family, our relationships, our job. Those are our things, our hobbies, you know, our interests, free time, whatnot, children, family, etc. I think I already mentioned both of those, but those are the things that occupy our thoughts because they're directly connected to us right in front of our faces, you know. But then if we get on social media or old days of watching the news and seeing these kids are starving in this and this country, you know, send them for 50 cents a day, you too can sponsor a child. We think of that, a lot of times we think of that in an insignificant fashion, but, you know, to that soul on the receiving end, now granted, make sure that charitable organization is actually getting that money to those recipients instead of generating fake letters and all the different scams that they've found out over the years. That's really disheartening too. Dang. But my point is, I kind of laugh at myself, you know, talking away on these rambles, on these installments about something like, oh, you know, I'm going home from work tonight and I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm going to stretch because I've got this. It's going to be what I'm doing. This is what I'm working on with the training aspect of my life, the lifting, working out, whatever you want to call it. And then think, wow, that compared to actually how am I going to eat tomorrow? If there was ever a time for a human being to embrace the principle of gratitude, it would be when you think about that kind of stuff. Because as trite as the expression sounds, things could always be worse. Yeah. If you live in a developed country and you have a job and you have a roof over your head, or if you have, you know, your next meal is sorted, you're taken care of, you are protected from the majority of violent events that we think are abhorrent. Some of those countries, violence is the only, like, that's the great common denominator, is that anywhere you go, you could be snuffed immediately by somebody who wants whatever you have, or, you know, whatever their particular thing is that at that moment. So if you have all of those things, if you were born in a first world country, or you live in a first world country, and you have all those other parameters, express some gratitude, because wow, the journey that your soul, that your psyche goes through the course of your life, and even on a minute by minute, day by day basis, is so different than what someone's life is like in a place like that. And you know, it's funny because in a lot of different realms we'll hear about somebody that let's say that comes to the U.S., for example, since that's where I'm at, I'm going to use this country. Someone who comes to the U.S. from a different country and, they were amazed by their work ethic. Like, God, they got themselves through college and they moved their entire family here and they just hustle. They work so hard. They're not the least bit lazy like us Americans are. Product of the environment then, and obviously different cultures encourage different levels of dedication to aspects of life like family, education, honoring tradition, work ethic. All those different things are in levels of vibration that are different everywhere you go. So when we see something that seems out of the ordinary for what we, let's be honest, lots of times we can be lazy ass Americans. Like one of my buddies used to say, we would pull up to the gym, of course, look for the closest possible parking spot, and then warm up by walking on the treadmill, usually walking backwards for 10-15 minutes, and say, one day him and I were thinking about, we must have both been thinking on the same wavelength. Said, do you know how ridiculous we are? We park as close as we can to get in here and then immediately start walking on a machine to get warmed up. Why don't we just park further away? Well, 10 minutes. I'm not going to park 10 minutes away from the gym. At that point, why even bother with getting on the treadmill? But it all boils down to your mindset, as always, and your motivation to do whatever it is, and then your perspective, the lens that you view your life and your spot in this universe. Yeah, that's all this life is. That's really all this is. And embracing that, constantly reflecting on it, and attempting to be as honest with yourself. You have to be. It's not an attempt. Be as honest with yourself as you need to be to improve. However that improvement may show itself. At the moment, you might feel called out. You might feel like you're being too rough on yourself, but if it doesn't serve you, if it doesn't benefit you, if it brings you heartache and pain to think negativity or the old story, or you're not truly, once again, living in the dream fulfilled, feeling the emotions that come with that law of assumption, then you're bound to repeat those same patterns. Just be honest with yourself. You're going to have moments of doubt and of question and wondering if you're doing the right thing. Press on. Persist. Acknowledge those moments. Thank you. Warning system. I'm good. I am good. I'm trusting in divine timing and all these other things that we say to ourselves. I'm in the right alignment and vibration. Here's the things I'm working on. Here's the things that I'm improving. But I'm already in full gratitude for those things occurring or happening through me, coming to me, is the way that we need to look at it. And don't get me wrong, as I state in almost every one of these installments, I am by no means the guru expert on any of this. I can only relate my own experiences so far in life and my personal self-reflection on how to shift the aspects of my personality, worldview, lens, perspective, whatever you want to call it, to a more positive, radiant, abundant, as above, so below, as within, so without. Reflectivity of positivity. Oh, I get frustrated. I get mad. I get upset. I get sad. Whatever. And I allow that emotion to appear. But for so much of my life, I was reactive. Oh, God. And anybody who is close to me can vouch for that get pretty bent out of shape, pretty pissed off pretty quick. And it's taken a while for me to recognize that some of those reactivity wires are still bare, so to speak. But honestly, for the most part, I am now so cognizant, even if I have to tell myself this is a simulation, as silly as some people would say that is, oh, it's a simulation. What are you talking about? It's not a simulation. This is reality. This is real life. This is the truth. This is life. It is, of course. It's your life. It's my life. It's his, hers, theirs, all of them. But the way that we embrace that life is our own journey and our own path. I get so philosophical after I was just talking about going home and stretching instead of working out, and then examining what am I doing to quote unquote rebuild. And it wasn't as if I was looking at working out as being like, oh no, I'm so crippled and broken and shriveled away that I'm trying to rebuild myself. Just addressing aspects of lifting, of working out, of training, of physical ability that, hey, maybe I can incorporate this in. Maybe on these nights that, let's say if I work on Friday and then open on Saturday, if I only have X number of hours between where I really need to be home earlier, maybe that would be a good night to stretch, that kind of stuff, or hey, on the days that I'm able to, go to the gym in the morning and get it out of the way. So when you get off of work at 7 o'clock every night, you don't have to go to the gym that night unless you wanted to do a double, because you've already taken care of it early in the day. And somehow I went from talking about that stuff to all these. This is why I call this Eric Dillon Rambles. Because I thought at first, Eric Dillon Unfiltered. Well, it's not filter. I mean, if anything, I'm probably not swearing every other word, because that gets dinged here on this particular platform very easily. But trying to be cognizant of that is about the only filter that I have. Do I swear more in real life, so to speak, compared to this? I guess, but I mean, there are certain things that you realize, like, oh, if this is what what the hell? If this is what parameters, rules, whatever, so to speak, that I'm trying to abide by, maybe I don't need to be dropping the F-bomb every other word, or whatever it may be, that's fine. Especially working at a job like I do, you have to be professional, and it doesn't come off very professional when you swear the whole time in front of at least customers, patients, whatever you want to moniker you want to use for your public. But same token, I'm just me. And like I said, I get on here, I ramble about nonsense. A lot of it always goes back to the power of our minds, that we have so much potential to do anything, literally anything we want to, if you truly believe it. That's always going to be something that I go back to, because it defines life. It defines everything. And at least in my little journey, finding that out and doing the necessary work and continuing to do the work with visualizations, affirmations, subliminal frequencies, God, all the different journaling, 369. Wow. Tons of different stuff. Living in the Dream Fulfilled, Neville Goddard, manifestation, law of assumption, law of attraction, all the things that I talk about. All of it. And then, ooh, what the fuck? Oh, yo, that's sketchy. I've never had my forward collision sensor go squeaking away like that. There was a semi just pulled over, but I wasn't anywhere near it, and apparently my crash warning system was telling me, hit the brakes, dumbass. Back it up, Terry. So yeah, ramble. Eric Dillon Rambles. That's not just the name of this little channel now, after I thought about unfiltered and all sorts of stuff. Whatever. It's also a statement, because anybody that knows me in real life says, yeah, Eric rambles. Eric fucking rambles. Dude, he just talks and talks and talks and talks and talks. And it's funny thinking about that, because my grandmother raised me, my mom's mom, and my grandfather, my mom's parents. But she told me repeatedly, when we first took you in, when we first had you and you were little itty bitty little baby, couldn't wait for you to talk. So excited for you to talk. But then, once you started talking and you wouldn't shut up, God, I wanted you to shut up. She said this, lovingly, don't get me wrong. But she said, I wanted you to talk so badly, and then once you did, I just want you to shut up. Shut the F up, Eric. You talk too much. Yeah, that may be true, but just like I've said in other videos, if you make it through a full video of me rambling away about this, I've got more respect for you than you can ever even imagine, because thank you for listening to just gibberish. I mean, I've got like I said, a thread of commonality through a lot of these, and that's the effect of the human mind and the power that we can harness to improve our lives and our environment, our everything with our mind. But 99% of the rest of the stuff that I talk about is just going to be whatever the hell, as soon as I get in here and start driving, the quasi-automatic act of getting behind the wheel and pointing myself to work, back home from work, to the gym from work, wherever. But you guys are awesome. I've I've heard from a few of you. Thank you, by the way, for the well wishes and whatnot. The comments. Yeah, but I guess I'm going to keep doing this, you know? I am going to keep doing this because maybe somehow, some way, there will be somebody that listens and I vibe with them, something that I say strikes a chord with them, and maybe it is that, you know, they start looking into positive mindset and science behind it all, the esoteric stuff and the, you know, and the nuts and bolts of it, as well as the more woo-woo stuff, and it puts them on a different path, you know? As I'm not trying to sound altruistic, but I just want to spread the word about this kind of stuff and hopefully give everybody that watches these ramblings, these installments, a little bit of humor along the way. Despite what some people may have thought over the years, I can be mildly humorous. I can be a little bit funny occasionally, depending on your sense of humor. Sure, but I've had enough life experiences that I've cataloged quite a few of them into some stories and whatnot that I'm sure will unravel out of my brain via these installments and these episodes. So, with that being said, I will see all of you beautiful folks in the next installment. Bye.